I spent 12 years building a life with her. 12 years of trust, partnership, and planning for a future I thought we'd share together. I worked 60-hour weeks, climbed from junior developer to senior architect, invested wisely, and saved aggressively. I thought we were building something together. I was wrong. The minute she decided I was successful enough, the minute the assets were worth taking, she found someone else. Someone younger. Someone exciting. Someone who wasn't her boring, predictable husband. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that every single asset she was counting on, every dollar she planned to take in the divorce, wasn't mine to give. And tonight, in a conference room with her lawyer and mine, I was going to watch her world crumble. My name is Michael Harrison. I'm 41 years old. I'm a software architect for a Fortune 500 tech company. I make $230,000 a year. I own, or rather my father owns, 3 rental properties worth approximately $1.8 million combined. I have, or rather my father has, investment accounts totaling just over $500,000. I drive a leased car. I rent my primary residence. And on paper, personally, I'm worth about $37,000 in a checking account and a modest 401k. My wife Lauren didn't know any of this. She knew I was successful. She knew we lived comfortably. She knew money was never a concern. What she didn't know was the structure behind it all. What she didn't know was that my father, a retired tax attorney, had insisted years ago that we set up an estate planning structure that protected generational wealth. What she didn't know was that I'd been thinking about protection long before I ever suspected I'd need it. Let me take you back to where this really started. Not to the affair. Not to the discovery. But to the conversation that would eventually save everything I'd worked for. 8 years ago, my father called me into his home office. He was 73 then, still sharp as ever, still practicing law part-time because retirement bored him senseless. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, handed me one, and said something I didn't fully understand at the time. He said, "Son, you're doing well. You're building wealth. That's good. But wealth without protection is just a target on your back. The world is full of people who'll see what you've built and decide they deserve a piece of it. Ex-spouses, lawsuits, business partners, even family sometimes. You need to think about structure. You need to think about protection." I was 33, newly married, optimistic about everything. I told him I appreciated the concern, but Lauren and I were solid. We were a team. He didn't argue. He just said, "Humor me. Let's set up a family trust structure. You can be the beneficiary. You can control the assets. But legally, they'll be held by the trust. If anything ever happens, you're protected." I agreed because I loved my father and respected his expertise. I didn't agree because I thought I'd ever need it. Benjamin Franklin once said that an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. My father was investing in my future knowledge, even if I was too naive to recognize it at the time. So we set it up. Every rental property I purchased, we purchased in the trust's name. Every investment account, same thing. My father was the trustee. I was the beneficiary. Legally, I controlled nothing. Practically, I controlled everything. It was elegant. It was airtight. And 8 years later, it would be the difference between losing everything and walking away whole. Now let me tell you about Lauren. When I met her, she was 26, working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm, ambitious and confident and magnetic. I was 30, just starting to hit my stride professionally, and completely captivated by her energy. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and changed the atmosphere, made everything feel more vibrant, more possible. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. The engagement was everything you'd expect. Romantic, thoughtful. Her parents cried. My parents welcomed her warmly. We planned a beautiful wedding, spent too much money on flowers and music and a venue that looked like something out of a fairy tale. I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. The first few years of marriage were good. Not perfect, but good. We had the normal adjustments. The learning curve of living with another person. The negotiations over finances and chores and whose family to visit for holidays. But we worked through it. We communicated. We built a life together. She knew I was doing well financially. She knew we could afford nice vacations, good restaurants, a comfortable lifestyle. But she never asked detailed questions about the structure. Never asked why we rented instead of buying a primary residence. Never questioned why certain assets appeared on statements with my father's name. She just enjoyed the benefits and assumed it was all mine, all ours, all hers by extension. Around year 7, things started to shift. Subtly at first. She began working later. Going out with co-workers more frequently. Her phone, which used to sit casually on the counter, now went everywhere with her. Bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, always within reach. Always face down. I noticed but didn't say anything. I told myself it was work stress. A big project. A demanding client. I trusted her. I trusted us. Then came the small lies. She said she was at dinner with Sarah from accounting, but when I ran into Sarah at the grocery store, Sarah mentioned she'd been home all week with the flu. Lauren said she was working on a weekend presentation, but her laptop was untouched on the dining room table when I got home. Lauren said she needed to take a work trip to Seattle, but the credit card statement showed charges in Portland instead. Each lie was small, explainable, defensible. But together, they painted a picture I didn't want to see. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I did it anyway. I hired a private investigator. His name was Robert Chen, retired police detective, specialized in infidelity cases. We met at a coffee shop near my office, and I gave him all the details. The late nights, the changed passwords, the unexplained trips. He listened without judgment, took notes, and told me he'd have answers within 2 weeks. He had them in 9 days. The photos were clinical, unemotional, time-stamped and geotagged. Lauren entering a hotel at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, I thought she was in meetings. Lauren and a man I didn't recognize having dinner at an expensive restaurant across town. Lauren and the same man walking hand in hand through a park I'd never been to. Lauren kissing him in the parking garage of her office building. The man's name was Derek Lawson, 34 years old. Sales director at a competing firm. Divorced. No kids. From what Robert could gather, they'd been seeing each other for approximately 9 months. 9 months. While I was working to support our lifestyle. While I was planning our 10-year anniversary trip. While I was trusting her completely. I sat in my car outside Robert's office, looking at the photos on the tablet he'd given me, and I felt something I'd never felt before. Not rage. Not sadness. Something colder. Something more focused. Clarity. I drove home that evening and watched her move through our apartment like nothing was wrong. She asked about my day. Made dinner. Told me about a funny interaction with a coworker. And I responded normally. Asked questions. Laughed at appropriate moments. Because I'd already made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was going to prepare. The next morning, I called my father. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time, then said what I knew he'd say. Son, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. But you need to get ahead of this legally. You need to talk to a divorce attorney before she does. I took his advice. I contacted Margaret Fielding, one of the top family law attorneys in the state. She came highly recommended by my father's network. Sharp, ruthless when necessary, compassionate when appropriate. We met in her corner office overlooking the city. I laid out everything. The affair. The evidence. The timeline. The assets. When I explained the trust structure my father had set up 8 years earlier, her expression changed. She smiled. Not a happy smile. A strategic smile. Michael, she said, you have no idea how fortunate you are. Most of my clients come to me after the damage is done, after they've commingled assets and made themselves vulnerable. You did the opposite. You protected yourself before you even knew you needed protection. She pulled out a legal pad and started mapping the strategy. In our state, she explained, marital assets are subject to equitable distribution. That means anything acquired during the marriage is fair game for division. But here's the beautiful thing. The properties aren't in your name. The investment accounts aren't in your name. Your salary goes into a joint checking account that you share with Lauren, and that's touchable. Your 401k is marital property, and that's touchable. But the significant assets, the ones worth fighting over, those are held by the trust. Those aren't marital property. Those are your father's property, held in trust for your benefit. So what does that mean practically? I asked. It means, she said, that when Lauren files for divorce, and she will file, she's going to demand half of everything. She's going to expect properties and investments and accounts. And we're going to produce documentation showing that you, personally, own almost nothing. We're going to show that you're a beneficiary of a family trust, but you don't own the trust. Your father does. And unless she wants to try suing your father, which she has no legal standing to do, she's walking away with half of very little. I felt something shift in my chest. Relief. Vindication. A cold satisfaction that I hadn't earned through revenge but through foresight I didn't even know I'd had. Margaret continued. Now, she said, here's what we need to do. First, document everything. Every account. Every asset. Every piece of the trust structure. Second, don't confront her yet. Let her make the first move. If she files first, she sets the tone, but we control the response. If you file first, you look aggressive, and we lose the moral high ground. Third, protect yourself emotionally. This is going to get ugly. She's going to be shocked and angry when she realizes the money isn't there. She's going to lash out. You need to be prepared for that. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. Not over Lauren. Not over the situation. But over my own response. Over my own future. I went home and continued the performance. I was the husband I'd always been. Attentive. Kind. Present. I asked about her day. I planned date nights. I pretended everything was normal while I quietly prepared for war. 3 weeks later, Lauren asked for a divorce. We were sitting on the couch, some mindless TV show playing in the background, when she turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Resolved. Almost relieved. Michael, she said, I think we need to talk. I muted the TV and turned to face her, keeping my expression neutral, curious, open. I've been thinking a lot lately, she continued, about us. About where we are. And I don't think this is working anymore. I don't think we're working anymore. I let the silence sit for a moment, then asked quietly, is there someone else? She had the decency to look uncomfortable. That's not really the point, she said. The point is that we've grown apart. We want different things. I think it's time we both admitted this marriage is over. I nodded slowly, like I was processing devastating news for the first time. Okay, I said. If that's how you feel, then okay. We should probably both get lawyers and figure out how to do this fairly. Her expression softened. She probably thought I was going to be difficult. Probably expected tears or anger or begging. The fact that I was calm, reasonable, made her visibly relax. I think that's best, she said. And Michael, I want this to be amicable. I don't want to fight. I just want us both to get what we deserve and move on. What we deserve. The phrase hung in the air. She thought she deserved half of everything. She thought she'd sacrificed for this marriage. She thought she'd earned her share of the wealth I'd accumulated. She had no idea what was coming. The next day, she moved out, took her clothes, her personal items, and moved into what I later learned was Derek's apartment across town. She texted me her attorney's contact information and suggested we try to handle everything without drama. I forwarded the information to Margaret, who smiled when she saw the name. Jonathan Reeves, she said. He's competent but arrogant. This is going to be fun. Over the next 2 weeks, the attorneys exchanged the standard paperwork. Discovery requests, asset disclosures, income statements. Lauren's attorney sent over their proposed division, which was exactly what Margaret predicted. 50-50 split of everything. Half the rental properties, half the investment accounts, half my 401k. Spousal support for 3 years while she got back on her feet professionally. The total demand was approximately $1.2 million. Margaret drafted our response, which I reviewed on a Tuesday afternoon in her office. It was beautiful, clinical, devastating. The response acknowledged the rental properties but provided documentation showing they were held in the Harrison Family Trust, established 8 years prior, with my father as trustee. Not marital property. Not subject to division. The response acknowledged the investment accounts but provided documentation showing they were also held in the trust. Not marital property. Not subject to division. The response acknowledged my 401k and offered a standard equitable division of that asset, which amounted to approximately $32,000 for each of us. The response acknowledged the joint checking account and offered a 50-50 split of the current balance, which was $19,000. The total offer was approximately $41,000. Not $1.2 million. $41,000. Margaret sent it over on a Wednesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, Jonathan Reeves was calling, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Margaret put him on speaker so I could listen. "Margaret," he said, "I assume this is some kind of negotiating tactic. The trust structure is clearly a sham designed to hide marital assets. We'll be filing to pierce the trust and prove fraudulent transfer." Margaret's response was calm, almost bored. "Jonathan, the trust was established 8 years ago, long before there were any marital difficulties. It was established for legitimate estate planning purposes with a qualified attorney, which I can provide documentation for. Every property and investment was acquired with funds that went through the trust. There's no fraudulent transfer. There's just good planning." "This is outrageous," he sputtered. "My client contributed to this marriage. She sacrificed her career opportunities to support Michael's advancement. She deserves compensation for that." Margaret leaned forward. "Your client had an affair for 9 months, Jonathan. My client has evidence. Photos, timestamps, hotel records. She sacrificed nothing. She betrayed everything. And now she's trying to take assets that were never marital property to begin with. If you want to go to trial, we're happy to present all the evidence of her infidelity and let a judge decide if she deserves a penny more than what we've offered." The line was quiet. Then Jonathan said, "I need to talk to my client," and hung up. I looked at Margaret. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "they panic. They realize they don't have the leverage they thought they had. They'll try to find another angle. Maybe argue you have a higher income potential and should pay support. Maybe claim emotional distress. But ultimately, they'll settle. Because going to trial means exposing the affair publicly, and that helps nobody." She was half right. They did panic. But they didn't settle immediately. Instead, Lauren started calling me directly. The first call came at 11 p.m. on a Friday. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was tearful, desperate. "Michael, please, we need to talk about this. Your lawyer is being unreasonable. I'm not trying to take everything. I just want what's fair. Please call me back. I didn't call back. I forwarded the voicemail to Margaret, who sent a cease and desist letter reminding Jonathan that all communication must go through counsel. The second call came 3 days later. This time I answered, keeping my voice neutral, detached. Lauren, I said, you need to talk to your lawyer. I can't have this conversation with you. Her voice was different now. Harder. Angrier. Are you really going to do this, Michael? Are you really going to hide behind your father's money and leave me with nothing? I'm not hiding behind anything, I said calmly. I'm following the law. The assets you want were never mine to give. They belong to a trust. You're not entitled to them. I gave you 12 years, she said, her voice rising. 12 years of my life. I supported you. I believed in you. And now you're going to throw me away with nothing? You gave me 9 months of lies, I said, my voice still eerily calm. 9 months of sneaking around with Derek while I thought we were building a future. You threw us away, Lauren. I'm just protecting what was mine before you decided it wasn't enough. She was quiet for a moment. Then, quieter, almost broken, she said, I made a mistake. I know I did. But you're punishing me financially for an emotional mistake. That's not fair. Fair, I repeated. You think fair is taking half of assets you never contributed to? Assets that were protected before you were even part of my life? You're not being punished, Lauren. You're just not being rewarded. There's a difference. I hung up. Margaret warned me the next day that things would likely escalate before they resolved. She was right. Lauren's attorney filed a motion to compel disclosure of all trust documents and financial records. We complied, providing everything requested. Every document confirmed what we'd already stated. Legitimate trust. Legitimate assets. No fraudulent transfers. They filed a motion arguing I had an obligation to support Lauren in the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. We countered with evidence of her affair and argued that infidelity negated any claim to long-term support. They filed a motion requesting forensic accounting to determine if I'd hidden income or assets. We welcomed it, knowing the accounting would only confirm what we'd already disclosed. Each motion was denied or resulted in findings that supported our position. The judge, a 60-year-old woman named Sandra Morrison, seemed increasingly impatient with Lauren's attorney's aggressive tactics. At one hearing, after Jonathan had spent 20 minutes arguing about marital contributions and sacrifices, Judge Morrison cut him off. "Counsel," she said, "I've reviewed the trust documents. They're legitimate. They predate the marriage problems by years. Your client is not entitled to assets held in a properly structured family trust. If you want to argue about the 401k division or spousal support duration, we can have that conversation. But stop wasting the court's time trying to pierce a trust that's clearly valid." Jonathan sat down, his face red. After the hearing, Margaret pulled me aside. "It's over," she said. "They're going to settle. They have no choice. Judge Morrison just told them, in open court, that they have no case for the trust assets. They'll negotiate on the smaller items and take what they can get." She was right. 2 weeks later, Jonathan called with a settlement proposal. They'd accept the 401k division, 50-50 split of the checking account, and requested 12 months of spousal support at $2,000 per month. It was more than I wanted to pay but far less than they'd originally demanded. Margaret advised me to accept. "You're walking away with every significant asset intact," she said. $24,000 in support is nothing compared to what you could have lost. Take the deal and move on." I took the deal. The divorce was finalized on a cold Tuesday morning in March. We met at the courthouse, signed the paperwork, and it was done. Lauren wouldn't look at me. Her face was drawn, exhausted. Derek wasn't with her. I later heard through mutual friends that they'd broken up shortly after the settlement. Apparently, He wasn't interested in someone who brought nothing to the table financially. Karma has a sense of humor sometimes. I walked out of that courthouse feeling something unexpected. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of closure. I'd protected what mattered. I'd walked away whole. And I'd learned something profound about the difference between revenge and protection. Revenge is reactive. It's hot. It's satisfying in the moment, but ultimately destructive. Protection is proactive. It's cold. It's calculated. It's boring. But it works. My father had taught me that 8 years before I needed the lesson. He'd given me the tools to protect myself before I even knew I was in danger. And in doing so, he'd given me something more valuable than money. He'd given me control over my own future. 6 months after the divorce, I was sitting in my father's office again. Same scotch. Same chairs. Different conversation. I poured the drinks this time and raised my glass. To you, Dad, I said. To teaching me something I was too young to understand. To protecting me before I knew I needed it. He smiled, that same knowing smile from 8 years before. Son, he said, the best protection is the kind you never have to use. The fact that you needed it doesn't make me happy. But the fact that you had it makes me proud. We drank in comfortable silence. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, you know what the real lesson is here? It's not about the money. It's not even about the protection. It's about thinking ahead. It's about understanding that life is unpredictable and the only thing you can control is your preparation for what might come. You can't control other people's choices. You can't control who they become. But you can control whether those choices destroy you. Maya Angelou once said that you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. My father had given me the tools to make that decision. To face betrayal and loss without being reduced. To walk away whole when others would have been destroyed. I've moved on now. New apartment. New routines. New possibilities. I date occasionally, but cautiously. I've learned to recognize red flags I once ignored. I've learned to protect not just my assets but my energy, my time, my trust. People ask me sometimes if I'm bitter. If I hate Lauren for what she did. The honest answer is no. I don't hate her. I don't think about her enough to sustain that kind of emotion. What she did was a betrayal, yes. But it was also a clarification. She showed me who she was. She showed me what mattered to her. And in doing so, she freed me from a future that would have been built on lies. The money she wanted, the assets she demanded, those were never about building a life together. They were about securing her comfort at my expense. And the fact that I was protected from that, the fact that structure and foresight saved me, that's not revenge. That's justice. Cold. Quiet. Fair. I think about the other version of this story sometimes. The one where I didn't have the trust structure. The one where I lost half of everything because I never thought ahead. The one where I spent years rebuilding financially while she lived comfortably on assets I'd worked to accumulate. That version ends with bitterness. With rage. With the kind of damage that takes decades to heal. This version ends with peace. With gratitude. With the understanding that protection isn't paranoia. It's wisdom. My father's health is declining now. He's 81. His hands shake when he pours scotch. His memory slips occasionally. But his mind is still sharp when it matters. Last week, I visited him and we talked about updating the trust structure. About preparing for the next generation. About teaching these same lessons to children I don't have yet but hope to someday. He looked at me with those same wise eyes and said, "You learned the lesson, son. You learned it the hard way, but you learned it. Now make sure it doesn't die with you." I won't let it die. I'll teach it to my children if I'm lucky enough to have them. I'll teach it to anyone who'll listen. The lesson that foresight beats revenge. That structure beats emotion. That protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Lauren reached out once more, about a year after the divorce. A long email. Apologetic. Reflective. She said she'd been in therapy. That she understood now that she'd sabotaged something good because she was chasing something that didn't exist. That Derek was a fantasy and I was reality, and she'd chosen poorly. She said she didn't expect forgiveness but wanted me to know she was sorry. I read the email once. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of indifference. That chapter was closed. She was part of my past, not my future. And dwelling on it, responding to it, reopening it in any way, that would be giving her power she no longer deserved. Instead, I focus on what I learned. About protection. About trust. About the difference between love and security. About the importance of structure in a world that's fundamentally chaotic. I focus on gratitude for a father who saw further than I could. Who prepared me for storms I didn't know were coming. Who taught me that the best defense isn't built in the heat of battle but in the quiet years of peace that come before. And I focus on the future. On building again. On trusting again, carefully. On knowing that betrayal is a possibility but not a certainty. On understanding that protection and openness aren't opposites. They're partners. You can be open to love while being protected from exploitation. You can be vulnerable while being secure. The rental properties are still generating income. The investments are still growing. The structure my father built is still intact, now protecting me not just from past threats but from future ones I can't yet imagine. And I'm still here. Whole. Unbroken. Not because I got revenge. Not because I destroyed someone who hurt me. But because someone who loved me taught me to think ahead, to plan, to protect. That's the real story. Not about a cheating wife who got what she deserved, but about a son who learned from his father that wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about preparing for anything. And in the end, that preparation made all the difference.